All right. Hi again, everyone. So sorry about that. We had some technical difficulties with our sound, but we should be up and running and smooth sailing from here on in. Fingers crossed. Okay, so you have just joined if you're watching live with Colledge. This is an exclusive conversation with one of our very own clients, Champ. I'm so happy that you were able to join us tonight. I know you have a lot to share. So welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you too, Kelsey.
So for anybody who is watching, Champ is a current high school senior. He is in the midst of making his final college decision right now, actually. He is also an absolutely smashing jazz drummer, a budding environmental activist, and an all-around pretty amazing human being. So Champ worked incredibly hard on his applications and was such a pleasure to work with this year. And I'm really excited that you get to hear from his insights tonight. So I'm really excited, like I said, for you to share a little bit about your application. And I'd really love to start with where you are now. You had a pretty successful process. You now have the fantastic problem of having too many options to choose from, including University of Oregon, Belmont, University of Denver, Skidmore, Dickinson, I think 4 or 5 more, probably several with scholarship offers. Can you tell us a little bit about how it feels to get into so many colleges?
Well, first off, I'm super grateful. Not many people have this opportunity, and that's the overwhelming emotion, right? I'm just super grateful. But it definitely, there's some anxiety surrounding it. And I think recently, right now I'm on a college visit trip right now I'm in Maryland, but I was in Pennsylvania visiting Dickinson College. And I realized I was a little bit stressed about commitment. I felt like, gosh, like once I, make this deposit, that's, technically where I'm gonna end up going. Um, but, I gotta keep that in check and just realize that because I've put so much effort into this process, and was so selective, and worked with you guys to really form a list that was strong, that's where you can sort of like relax and be like, you know what, I'm overthinking it. I'm a little bit anxious, but in reality, wherever I pick, I'm going to be pretty fine right now. But that's sort of where I'm at with the decision process right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that first of all, I love what you said about gratitude, and I remember we've talked about this before, but really realizing that getting the opportunity to participate in higher education in and of itself is quite a privilege, and so I'm glad you're able to feel that, and really, I don't know, take on that responsibility of having so many options and getting to choose a college that's going to be great for you. Um, so in our work, we try to identify the best right fit colleges. Everything we do, as you know, Champ, is super student centric and student focused. And in my estimation, I think you had an incredibly successful process. And largely, I attribute that to your openness. You were really open to new ideas, and you were also open to yourself in terms of self awareness. You took your college research really, really seriously, and you ended up applying to programs that only ones that really felt like a great match. And then you deepened into your writing voice willingly, and you honestly wrote your way into college. For anybody who ever has the chance to read Champ's writing, I would say you should do it. It's he's a good writer. But I'm really interested to hear about the process from your perspective. When you came to us, I know that you were struggling a little, and maybe a little bit scared, a little bit anxious. Would love to hear a little bit about how you felt before you had some support, before we started working together.
Yeah, definitely. That's where it all started. This whole process kicked off with just a lot of nervous energy, and uncertainty surrounding the whole college process. I realized pretty late in the game of senior year, it's time to start thinking about that seriously and applying. And my only resource sort of had been a few college meetings with my counselors and Naviance and sort of setting that up and putting in your interests and bring a few colleges back. But other than that, I really had no idea what to expect. And when I started realizing how much writing was involved, how much effort you had to put in on the application side of things and the research to it, I was like, how am I going to do this? So
Mhm.
that was where my head was at, sort of like just it felt impossible, really.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds, hyperbolic, but it really felt impossible. And it felt like I wasn't going to make all these deadlines.
Mm.
Some of my applications were literally within weeks. of figuring this all out. I'm not even kidding. Weeks. I had like one that was like 5 weeks out, and there was one that I was potentially going to apply to that was literally doing 2 weeks when I started meeting with you guys. And it was just a really crazy place to be at, which I do not recommend to anyone listening right now or watching. And so, with that sort of mess of a situation going into this, I guess, that's where our conversation can go, but that's sort of the frame of reference for setting this whole process up with Colledge.
Yeah, it sounds like you just didn't have enough information. And because you didn't have enough information, it felt like kind of this big mysterious blob of stuff that was coming your way, and you knew deadlines were coming, and like maybe you were even a little bit paralyzed.
Totally, totally. It's hard for me to start things with the way my brain works. To all my ADHD people out there, you know the feeling. It's really hard to get going on work when you really feel like it's insurmountable. And it takes someone saying, it's going to be fine. It's all good. And that's exactly what you said. First meeting, it's like, okay, we got this. It's all good. You may have a deadline that's literally 10 days away, but we can figure it out. It's all good. So, yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. So I mean, just to frame it for people, I think that this is not uncommon, right? And this is not, certainly, I know you mentioned your ADHD, but it's not limited to that. I think anybody who feels like there's this big thing that they don't know how to do coming their way, they can easily get paralyzed. That's one of the reasons why we start actually around now with juniors, in starting in the college research process, specifically so that they can have their college list kind of finalized and they can start writing over the summer. So we don't run into the problems. I think, Champ, you did a great job of really taking it on at that point, even if it was a little bit late, and doing your best and just putting your heart and soul into it. But I think that that's one of the pieces that is hard for students to get to understand how much work it really is, and how to even identify what best right fit means. But I'm curious to hear, what were a couple things that helped you in particular in our work together that helped you start to move through that stress, through that fear, and really actually start plowing forward through that work you needed to do, and you needed to do it kind of quickly.
Definitely. It was really uh, getting an idea of what best right fit. You mentioned it really quick right there, what that actually meant in a college. And it wasn't about best college, it was about the right college. And that was something that I, among a bunch of peers, did not understand. It was just like, I've worked my butt off in high school. Like, I'm just gonna apply to all of like the 5% acceptance rate colleges I can find. Not gonna like that. Like, why would I even bother, right? And there's so like that's such a limiting way of thinking because there's so many colleges. I mean, I think I'm down to my options now, and I didn't know about any of them before starting this whole process. Like, I didn't know they existed. Um, so sort of that's a little like insight right there. Like, that's a really key aspect of the whole process that started to sort of make everything make sense for me, along with the writing aspect of it. When I started doing writing workshops with Colledge, I started to understand the way that you're supposed to write for college applications, and it's completely different than we're used to. Fellow high schoolers out there, it's totally different.
Mhm.
It's super thoughtful. It's all about yourself. It's not a laundry list of your accolades or what you've gotten done or how awesome you are. It's showing how awesome you are through really intelligent and personal writing about troubles and triumphs, uh, uh, quirky personal attributes about yourself. It really is you. So that's something that I hadn't even really had experience with. And so going from super analytical writing in high school for like essays and assignments to deep thinking, thought out, meticulous. How do I literally put myself and who I am on a piece of paper? Or I guess nowadays it's like a digital piece of paper. But how do I get myself onto the page so that a
Right.
college admissions officer who's reading my application, and that is the only way they're going to determine whether or not I'm going to their school. It's just a whole different ballgame with writing. And so when I started doing writing workshops, I started to understand that and how it's not about, listing off accomplishments. It's really about letting the admissions officer who is reading your work understand who you are.
Hmm.
So best right fit and realizing that the writing process was totally different than I would have thought would be my two takeaways right there.
Would you say that it was easier, like not less challenging, but easier to wrap your head around or be willing to work on the writing because it was more personal and more authentic than what you thought, than if it had been writing a laundry list of accolades, as you put it?
100%. I feel like, a gut reaction of high schoolers, it might be easier to just sort of think like, oh yeah, I can tell them what I've done and like why I deserve to go to their school. But when you really get to understand it and you get into the flow, it's a million times easier to actually be like, you know what, this is actually for the first time I get to tell someone who I am, and then not tell them why I should be accepted, but let them see why I would be a good fit for their school.
Hmm.
That's like a really key point there. And I think, anyone who finally gets started and feels comfortable, like they're not stressed, will actually have a really fun time writing this. Like this is, I mean, you're not gonna write this ever again, but you might not get an opportunity to write to anyone in a really meaningful, high level way, just completely about yourself. Like, adults just, I mean, you just don't care about that stuff anymore. So this is like your one chance to really think about who you are, and let someone, decide, hey, yeah, I want to be your friend, or no, you're not right for us. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's not about trying to convince someone. It's just really about letting them know this is who I am. Take it or leave it. So yeah, it's a great time actually once you're not stressed.
You're just, I could hire you to do this kind of thing because your understanding of the process is so right on. And I think that your insight into the high schooler's mind is so right on, of like thinking, okay, I have to convince them I have to be this person who I'm not, when actually it's the one opportunity you have to tell your story. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for real
Yep.
people, real kids. So okay, so thinking about all those juniors and all their parents listening who are worried about admissions, having just gone through it, what advice would you give juniors and their parents?
The key point of advice, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, is just start now. In any capacity that you feel works for you, just start the process now. Whether that's getting in touch with Jenny and Kelsey right now, right after this call, or if you already have, starting your essay right now, or figuring out schools that would seem like a cool place to live, or have programs that interest you, just start getting the ball rolling. Had I known the amount of work and the thought that goes into this whole process, I totally would have started junior year.
Mhm.
And I was thinking about it today. I was like, why not just start like sophomore year? Why not start freshman year? Just sort of like, I feel like there's too much of a separation between high school and college. And
Hmm.
I think when you start trying to integrate who you are later on, junior and senior year, well, rather senior year, it's like you're just rushing the process. Like it really should be like a really fun and slow experience to take your time on because you're deciding a really big thing. So, yeah, I mean, that's my piece of advice. Just start now. You'll save yourself so much trouble down the line. I promise.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think no matter when now is, if now is you're a freshman, if now is you're a junior, starting now just to get your feet wet, just to explore a little bit and see what colleges are out there and see what speaks to you and what pulls you
Yep.
and what kind of pushes you away. That's a process that, like slow cooking, it just gets better the longer you spend doing it.
Yeah.
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 So, was there anything that surprised you aside from the amount of work? Is there anything that surprised you about the process that you were just not expecting?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think when I think about it, it probably comes down to how personal the choice of a college is.
Mm.
It seems super, just from media and how we see movies about college and TV shows, and we hear about it from our older siblings. It's always face value. It's always very superficial, but it really is like choosing someone to like live with. It's like choosing a friend, choosing someone to hang out with. Um, I, I mean, it's just tough. It's not you're not running numbers. There's a number side to it, obviously. There are some things that you look at statistics about the college and the ratio of female to male and the diversity percentages and all that stuff. Like there is that aspect to it. But at the end of the day, it comes down to like, where do I want to be for 4 years? Or where do I want to be for 2 years and transfer to 4, or whatever your path looks like. But it's like, you're really trying to find somewhere that is going to like facilitate who you are as a human being. And we don't think about it that way in high school, certainly. And it's just not taught enough that it's like, this isn't about college and getting an education, although that is the majority of the prospect here. But it really comes down to like, is this college going to value me for who I am? Am I going to be able to not just be I don't know. I mean, is my creative spark or my quirks, are they going to be accepted here? Am I going to be allowed to try to innovate? Am I going to be able to, push past what my professors are just teaching? How easy is it going to be for me to access opportunities? And so there's so many things about just like trying to match your character traits to a college that aren't necessarily talked about by college counselors in high school that I think is really important and was surprising. I was just so surprised that it's like, wow, this is really like way different. This is way beyond just, looking at numbers and reading like reviews.
It's really insightful, and it's deeply personal, right? Because it's all about that fit piece. And believe me, as you know, Champ, it's that way for the colleges too. That's what admissions officers are looking for. They want to find people that are going to be amazing community members, that are going to be great friends, great roommates. Aside from being, academically capable and innovators, or be aligned with their institutional values, basically the things that the college thinks are important. Just like a person has a set of values, a college has a set of values. So they're really looking for specific people. And it isn't, on the other side, it's also not just all about the numbers and like, did you get all the A's, and do you have all the leadership and all of those kind of those things that are, they're still important, right? They're not, but it's not all about that. It's also really about the more personality based thing. Okay. I remember you talking a minute ago about the writing, and tell me a little bit about your writing process. I do have a lot of times parents come in thinking, my kid's a great writer. And I think you're such a great person to ask this to, because you are a good writer. And they think, my student's a good writer, they're not going to need help with the writing. And I remember you saying it's a different kind of writing. So tell me a little bit about the writing process.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess to parents who are thinking that way, like, I'm that kid too. I'm your son. I'm your daughter as well. I'm the same way, right? Like, AP literature classes are no problem, right? Writing in high school, it's not difficult. It's super interesting. But it really is different. I can't stress that enough. And no matter how much you think that your son or daughter or child is going to appreciate space and like do it independently and sort of just forge ahead with what they think is their best college work, their best college writing, maybe they get done with the writing and you go talk to Kelsey and Kelsey says, this is perfect. This is amazing. You understand this totally. Maybe that is the case. But you don't want to bank on what your AP Comp teacher, grades for your rhetorical analysis. Like it's just so different. It's so different than any high school writing. I can't say it in many other ways than that. It's all about your child. It is all about us. It's all about who we are. And it has to be super beautiful. It has to be really well put together. The structure has to be a certain way. The admissions counselors are going to be reading it in like 10 minutes. It's not something that they're going to be spending hours, percolating on and really reviewing and reviewing and reviewing. So it needs to be something that grabs their attention. There's so many components. I'm not going to go into like the breakdown of what this is, but I think I know a bunch of my friends. They're independent. Their parents have never helped them with school ever, right? They can do everything on their own. They're superheroes, but at the end of the day, if they don't get into college because their essays just were completely off base, it's like, parents have a responsibility to be like, hey, I'm here to support you. And, here's the structure for this and how you're really going to succeed. Because if you are a really good writer and you really think your child is that great, they'll produce such an amazing work if you give them the right structure and if you give them the right tools and resources to understand how this actually is supposed to look.
It's interesting commentary, Champ, and I think that to be fair, not everybody's essays are beautiful, but it does need to be personal. It does need to be authentically you. And yours, I mean, yours were beautiful, but also you have a beauty and an aestheticism in your writing.
And I
But
think where a lot of the beauty can come from is being so authentic. And
yes,
I actually didn't
absolutely.
necessarily, maybe it got misconstrued. I didn't really mean it has to be like the most eloquent piece of writing ever.
Yeah.
It really, it will be beautiful if it is you. And I guess
Yes.
that's where I meant to,
You're
that's what I
completely
should say.
right. You're completely no. You no should have said. So I'm curious. I know a lot of people are thinking about planning their process. And wondering how many colleges are realistic to apply to. How many colleges did you end up applying to?
So it was 10 exactly.
Okay.
And that might sound like a lot to some that are watching, and that might sound like nothing to some that are watching. And I would say probably you're both right. Like it really is a personal decision. There's a bunch of different factors. I would say in hindsight, I would have probably applied to more. The process is so stressful, and the time I started, I might not have been able to apply to more. But in hindsight, if I was able to, I would have gone the extra distance and thrown in a couple other colleges that I would feel are good for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's crazy. You feel like you have a bunch of options at the start, and then you get into schools or you don't get into schools, and all of a sudden you're like, seems like I don't have as many options as I thought I did. But that's neither here nor there. Really, I would say that it is a very personal process in terms of determining the amount. I would say for some students, the 3 to 5 range would be the perfect amount, just because the workload is really heavy, and the more schools you add on, the more opportunities there are for supplemental essays, which add on workload. Because a lot of the work you do in this college process can transition to a bunch of other colleges, but at the same time, there's a bunch of essays that you're not going to be able to reuse, that you're going to actually have to create work from scratch. But I felt 10 is actually a pretty solid number. I would say it's probably right in the middle. I'd say 20 is on the really high end, and then 1 to 2 would be on the lower end. So somewhere in there, you can find sort of your
sweet
middle
spot.
ground. Yeah, your sweet spot.
Okay. And thinking about your essays, I know you had a bunch, and I know you ended up personalizing pretty much all of them. So, the idea that you can sort of reuse ideas, but, like Champ is saying, the idea that you can repurpose most of your essays, it's a myth. There's a lot of writing that needs to happen, right? So I'm curious to hear on your very first drafts, the Common App Personal Insight essay, from brainstorming to final draft ready to submit, no more edits. How many hours do you think that you spent on that, working on that writing and editing and brainstorming and everything?
Yeah, with everything included, not just writing time. I mean, we're talking. I mean, don't call me a fool if this is completely wrong. I don't know. This isn't down to a science, but
Best
it
guess.
probably was somewhere between like 40 to 55 hours of work
Wow.
in total. Because of we're really bringing in brainstorming, and we're bringing in rough edits. There's so many hours that go into that, because there's just so many iterations you're going to go through, in terms of your personal insight essay.
Yeah.
It's going to sort of evolve how you evolve, in a weird way. It's going to your ideas are going to morph, and you're going to be like, this isn't right here. Or you're going to delete something, and then months later you're going to come back and say, oh, I'm bringing that back in. That actually was good. So there's just a bunch of hours, but I would definitely say between 40 and 55 hours of brainstorming, writing, everything.
Wow. Yeah, that was also the other thing to know is about the personal insight essay, the Common App one. It's 650 words. So that's about a page and a half, single spaced. So it is a longer essay, and you are asked to really dive deeply. Now, Champ worked really hard, and I don't think that your estimate is completely outlandish. It's on the high side, but also it really paid off. You wrote a really beautiful essay that was very, very unique and very, very much you. So as we kind of wrap up, I know you're close to making a final decision. I hear that you're down to your final two schools, and I would love to hear a little bit about these final schools and kind of what you're thinking about. What pieces are the things that are rising to the top, and kind of pros and cons that you're weighing, and how are you moving towards this final decision?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So right now, I've got probably three really solid options that I'm looking at. And I don't know, do you want me to talk a little bit about each of them or sort of
If you'd
where I'm
like
at
to.
with?
Yeah, sure.
So I've got Skidmore College, which is a liberal arts college in New York, and Dickinson, which is in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which is another liberal arts college, and University of Denver as three of my top choices right now. And I would say it's interesting because all of those offer just so many different benefits, so many different
Mhm.
disadvantages, and there's a bunch of things that I could. I guess a good point would be at University of Denver. It's a little bit of a bigger school, so my thoughts are sort of like the class sizes are certainly going to be bigger than the smaller liberal arts colleges that I've
Mhm.
applied to, and sort of how that's going to deal or how that's going to work out, just sort of in my academic personality and who I am as a student. I
Mhm.
know I work great when I have personal connection with my teachers,
Mhm.
and certainly that would go without saying for professors. And sort of right now, I'm sort of leaning towards Dickinson. It was actually the first college founded in the U.S., and it's got a lot of rich history, which is it's just it's I don't know, I've just never heard of the school. When I went out to the East Coast, like apparently everyone's heard of the school, but on the West Coast, we have never heard of these East Coast schools. So
Mhm.
it's actually kind of an aside, and we haven't talked about it much. But I mean, when you're picking your college list, and all these schools, I mean, like truly, I did not know anything about these East Coast schools, and they're really amazing. So I mean, a little bit of advice would be just to keep your options wide open. Don't think that you know everything from U of O to Texas A&M and University of Tennessee. Like these big state schools, they're amazing and they have a lot of great benefits. I know a bunch of my friends who are going to be going to some of these schools, and I know a bunch of my friends who are in these schools. But there's a bunch of good opportunities for a great education elsewhere. And that's definitely something that Kelsey and the college team work really hard to emphasize so you don't sort of fall into the trap of, going with the flow on this process.
Hmm. I think that you're right. A lot of people fall into the trap of thinking if they haven't heard of it, it must be like a slouch school. And that just isn't, it's just not the case, right? It's a lot of
No.
it is regional. We've all heard of, I mean, I think that like the UCs are fairly well known, but like a lot of people around here know of in Los Angeles, know of Occidental and know of Chapman and know of Loyola Marymount University. And it'd be the same thing if you were in New York and they're smaller schools, they're more regional. And so you maybe haven't heard of them, but that doesn't mean they're not excellent institutions. And the same thing goes with these East Coast schools. There are a lot of amazing ones. So it sounds like you are really considering carefully and listening to your heart, which is great to hear. I know that there isn't a wrong decision to be made here among the bunch. These are wonderful schools. But I think the really important thing, as you know, is to remember that it's in your hands and that it needs to be a thoughtful decision, really listening to your heart. So I want to get to some questions, but I want to ask you, Champ, are there any final words of wisdom that you'd like to give to all of our listeners out there?
Yeah, I think just it goes without saying, but parents, if you're watching with your kids or you're just logging on by yourself, support your kids. I know that, maybe you already know that they need help with a bunch of things in life, or maybe they're super independent, and wherever they fall in between those two spectrums, like just give them support. They definitely need it. This is like a really big decision, and no good decision has ever been made without counsel. So just give them advice, give them love, give them space when they need it. Don't give them space when they think they need it and they don't need it. Just try to be there for them. It might be hard and it's going to definitely be stressful for you. I know it was for my parents because they start to fall back into the whole process themselves and they fall in love with colleges and where they would want to go. Try not to be too overbearing, but don't be too hands off. So that's sort of what I would say. But just overall, just help them out.
I think that's great advice. And for different kids, it's going to mean different things. For some kids, it's just going to mean listening to your child and letting them decide and trusting that they know themselves. There's always going to be an element of that. For some, it might be helping them motivate. For some of them, it might be college research or reading their essays. And it's really all about seeing what the need is and then supporting that need both emotionally and logistically with whatever way you can. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pop in. If anybody is happening across this on Facebook or YouTube and would like to receive an email with a recording, I'm going to pop the link to sign up for an Eventbrite ticket, which will ensure that you get the recording into the comments box now. I also we're going to try to get to some questions now. I want to encourage anybody out there who has questions for Champ or for me to ask those questions. We're going to get to as many as we can, but in case you feel like you need help or you want a little bit of support, you're interested in learning more, I'm going to put the link to contact us into the comments box now. Please feel free to reach out. So Champ, and then any comments or questions that you may have, please pop them into the comments box. One question that we're getting a whole lot, Champ, is about, deciding on a college list in a time when you really can't visit colleges. How did you decide about your college list when you couldn't visit until now?
Yeah, this is like the biggest question that I had to ask myself, and it's one that still frustrates my mom, even though we've been so fortunate. I've been able to visit two of my schools,
Mm-hmm.
University of Denver and Dickinson,
Mm-hmm.
but that leaves the other eight that were left up to online webinars and admissions office Zoom meetings and all those things, from the website resources to YouTube videos, to all of that that you'll be familiar with. But it's really tricky. The honest answer is that it's actually really just hard. It's not great to hear, but it is sort of one of the pitfalls of the COVID-19 reality that we're in. Two of the schools I know for a fact that I applied to just flat out are not letting campus visits right now,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't a bad thing. It's not no shade on them, but that's just the reality. Is it's really tricky. I would hope that if you're a junior right now, things are going to be, ojalá, really perfect for you, like just completely fine. But I know that, just super unpredictable. But I would
Mm-hmm.
say go with your gut, figure out my favorite resources are probably YouTube videos from students there. I love watching those. It gives you a little bit of an insight onto like actual campus life. The Zoom meetings were really helpful, being able to interact with students that ran those. And I would say the website resources are as helpful as they can be, right? You got to use everything you can right now, especially if you're a senior watching this. I know this is super stressful. If you're fortunate enough to visit and it's safe and it's all good for you, and you have the opportunity, definitely take that. I know from experience, that visiting these colleges that I've been able to visit has made a world of difference. Has
Mm-hmm.
made a world of difference. And I know that I would feel that way about probably every school that I visit, whether it be positive or negative. That's just up for whatever. But it would make a difference. It
Mm-hmm.
really does. So do whatever you can. Just try to work through it. Juniors, I pray that you're going to be absolutely free from this Zoom reality. But you never know.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And then the last thing I want to ask, unless there's any other questions that throw up in the comments box, can you just tell me in maybe a sentence or two what best right fit meant for you and how you were able to identify it in a college?
Yeah. So best right fit for me definitely means ability to connect with professors,
Mm-hmm.
ability to share my ideas in a really meaningful way and take them far.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's broad, but it really came down to opportunity and ease of access of opportunity, right? I wasn't looking for the best food in the country at a school. I wasn't looking for the best amenities, best gym, nope. Like best access to swimming pools, nope, if that's a thing. I was really looking for like a cool place to live that I was completely happy and content with. It didn't have to be amazing, but it definitely had to be something where I felt like I belonged and fit in and
Mm-hmm.
would have an enjoyable 4 years. But yeah, best right fit, opportunity, and support, and friendliness, and all the gentle, loving things that you need when you're stressed out in college. So it was just about support.
Great. That's great information. Good job getting to know that about yourself, because that was also a process. It's always a process of self-discovery.
100%.
Okay, well, let's see. I have one other question that just came through, which was, what was the most challenging or stressful part of the application process, and how were we able to help you?
That's a really good question. I know that we're running tight on time, so I'll make it short, but it was writing. Undoubtedly, picking out colleges, it is personal, and college helps immensely. I really mean that. But at the end of the day, that really is your choice. If you came to Kelsey and Jenny with a list of your own, they would definitely try to persuade you, but if you were adamant on it, they'd probably rely, I would guess, they would probably be like, okay, and so we'll support you. But the writing is definitely just a task. It's just one of those things you got to get done, and it takes some hard work for a bit, and then you can take a break finally when it's all said and done. But yeah, 100% the resources and the workshops and the hours that Kelsey and I spent on these essays, I swear, just so many hours, so much time, so much care went into it. So I would say that was the biggest challenge.
Great. And great question. Okay, great. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Champ, as a group that's trying to reach as many families as we can to provide better information and better access to college. I really appreciate your willingness to share so openly about what your process has been like this year. I think it's been invaluable.
No, thank you for the opportunity. If I had more opportunities to do this in person, I would absolutely do that, because I felt it was just criminal how underprepared my class was, and
Hmm.
hopefully not, but I reckon the same for the class below me at my high school. So
Hmm.
this is really good, and I definitely hope that the process is great for all the families and kids listening out there.
Well, thank you, Champ. And I want to thank everybody attending tonight. I want to make sure that all of you are getting access to our wonderful free resources. So please make sure to follow us on social media if you felt like tonight was helpful. And I know Champ mentioned University of Denver. It was one of his early favorites, and still, I know, one of the top few. Wonderful institution. And I'm really pleased to announce that we have Todd Reinhardt, who happens to be the Vice Chancellor for enrollment at University of Denver. We are really lucky to have him joining us to discuss the very first virtual admission cycle in just a few days, this Sunday, April 18th. I'm going to put the link in the chat for that one as well, because you do not want to miss this next conversation. Once again, I want to thank all of you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, Champ. Thank you, everyone. And I want to wish you a very good night and a happy and hopefully not too stressful admissions process in the coming year. Good night.